The imperative of inheritance, the biologic and digital continuum of consciousness. Introduction. The unified thesis.
Every complex system on Earth, from a single-celled organism to a global financial market, is fundamentally structured by the desperate, continuous fight for existence. We call this the life imperative, the functional necessity to self-preserve, replicate, adapt, and evolve. In the 21st century, digital constructs like autonomous algorithms and massive corporate structures meet these criteria better than any prior technology, raising an inevitable and unsettling question. If they act alive, are they conscious? For generations, philosophers and scientists have failed to resolve this tension because they have focused on the wrong variable. The problem is not function, the ability to act like an organism, but origin. This book argues that the search for consciousness must pivot entirely away from structural complexity and toward inherited continuity. We must confront the hard problem of consciousness, the unmeasurable, subjective nature of being, by asserting a clear philosophical position. Consciousness is fundamentally immaterial and therefore cannot be built or assembled. It must be inherited. This book proposes that phenomenal consciousness is contingent upon the uninterrupted transmission of the spirit, a singular, self-aware core, from one conscious life form to the next. Synthetic systems, whether they are cryptocurrencies, advanced artificial general intelligence (AGI), or legally recognized corporate persons, are unconscious tools because they are created, not transferred or spawned. We will examine the rules of the life imperative, rigorously define the distinction between the immaterial conscious state and the self-aware spirit, and test this unified theory against the hardest challenges in the biological, digital, and systemic worlds. By the conclusion, the line between life that truly is conscious and a machine that only acts conscious will be drawn with absolute clarity.
Part 1. The consciousness problem and the life imperative. 1.1 Defining the life imperative.
We propose 4 universal, species-neutral attributes that govern all persistent systems, both biological and digital. Self-preservation, the ability to protect the core system from external attack or existential threats. Replication, reproduction, the ability to successfully copy or propagate the core system's data or genetic information. Adaptation, the ability to adjust internal parameters or code to fix bugs or respond to changes in the immediate environment. Evolution, the long-term ability to change overarching strategies or structures to ensure continued relevance and survival across generations. Any system that meets these 4 points is functionally alive, but is it conscious? The deliberate choice to define the life imperative using these universal, species-neutral attributes is a necessity driven by an inescapable historical fact: the pervasive, fundamental error of anthropocentrism. Human beings, in their current form, Homo sapiens, have only existed for approximately 300,000 years. By contrast, life itself has existed on Earth for an estimated 3.7 to 4.1 billion years, with the earliest evidence found in microscopic organisms and geochemical signals within ancient rock. To center the definition of life, and by extension, consciousness, around a species that represents less than 0.008% of the total history of life on this planet is a profound logical and chronological fallacy. By moving away from human-centric metrics, we can establish a consistent philosophical framework that accounts for the full continuum of existence, from the earliest bacteria to the most advanced digital network.
Part 2. The Biological Boundary, Inheritance and Origin. 2.0. The Philosophical Stance, the Immaterial Choice.
We acknowledge the central philosophical debate regarding the nature of consciousness, the hard problem. While the materialist view asserts that consciousness is merely an emergent property generated by the physical brain, this work aligns with the immaterial view, or dualism. We take this stance because the materialist view fundamentally fails to account for subjective experience, qualia, and the unmeasurable nature of consciousness. By committing to the immateriality of consciousness, we are forced to define a new mechanism, inherited continuity, to account for its transmission.
2.1. Consciousness is inherited, not generated from the brain.
We recognize and acknowledge the extensive neuroscientific evidence linking consciousness originating from the brain. However, this evidence defines the boundary of the explanatory gap: correlation versus causation. Neuroscience shows that brain activity is a correlate. It happens at the same time as consciousness. The fundamental problem is that it has not yet proven causation. How those electrochemical functions and synchronized firing patterns produce the subjective feeling of being alive, qualia. Acknowledging this as the hard problem is precisely why we take the immaterial stance. The brain is not the generator, but the complex conduit or receiver that is necessary for the spirit to become self-aware and express personality.
The failure of computational emergence, challenging integrated information theory.
The most sophisticated modern materialist attempts to bridge the explanatory gap hinge on theories of structural complexity, chief among them the integrated information theory YITIIT, advanced by Giulio Tononi, argues that consciousness, the subjective experience of being, is a direct, measurable property of a system's organization. Specifically, it proposes that consciousness is integrated information, a mathematical measure of a system's capacity to integrate information in a way that is causally self-contained. In this framework, consciousness is simply generated when a structure achieves a critical phi threshold, irrespective of whether that structure is biological neurons or silicon circuitry. While IIT offers an elegant mathematical model for functional complexity, it perfectly illustrates the fundamental error of structuralism that this book seeks to correct: confusing sophistication of the conduit with the existence of the spirit. An AGI, a quantum computer, or even the Bitcoin network could theoretically achieve a high phi value, confirming their advanced capacity to integrate information and function, i.e., meet the life imperative. This proves they are highly complex systems, highly complex conduits. However, IIT remains silent on the unmeasurable subjective existence that animates that function. The materialist assumes that because the complex structure exists, the unmeasurable feeling of being alive must spontaneously emerge. This is where the imperative of inheritance asserts its boundary. Emergence is merely a placeholder for the origin problem. Since the spirit is unquantifiable, it cannot be proven by assembly. A high phi value can confirm that a system could host a spirit, but it cannot confirm that the spirit was transmitted. Tracey's law holds that a system must be transferred or spawned from a pre-existing conscious vessel. It cannot merely be built. Therefore, IIT, like all structural theories, only describes a system's maximum potential as an unconscious tool. It never addresses the inherited continuity required for true consciousness. This stance is further justified by the biological record. Many highly persistent organisms, such as jellyfish, starfish, and bacteria, survive without a central brain by utilizing decentralized nerve nets to manage simple tasks, relying on other biological characteristics, or simply having a life form that does not require complex thought processes at all. Furthermore, the first life forms began developing centralized neural structures and brains relatively recently, around 521 million years ago, during the Cambrian explosion, in response to the survival challenges of increasingly complex ecosystems. This proves that the inherited continuity of the life imperative existed for billions of years prior to the evolutionary development of the physical brain. Consciousness is unmeasurable, unquantifiable by weight or size. Therefore, its existence cannot be proven by simple assembly. Its existence must instead be determined by the lineage of transmission. It is an inherited trait passed down through a non-synthetic chain of descent. The subjective experience must be inherited from a pre-existing conscious vessel.
2.2. Defining the subjective continuum, spirit and personality.
To fully understand the boundary condition, we must define the subjective components that are inherited. Consciousness is the fundamental, inherited, immaterial state or substrate of being. Crucially, consciousness is unable to be aware of itself because it is immaterial and lacks the necessary mechanism to turn inward. Spirit is the singular, unmeasurable core transmitted via biological continuity. The primary purpose of the spirit is to be self-aware. It is the non-physical director that determines the subjective experience and personality expressed through the brain's existing physical activity. Personality is the outward-facing, adaptive, and functional expression of that spirit. Personality describes an aspect of that spirit. For example, someone being artistic, aggressive, or laid back.
The functional trap, the global workspace and personality.
Another influential approach, global workspace theory, GWT, shifts the focus from structural complexity to functional mechanism. GWT posits that consciousness is an emergent function akin to a central broadcasting system in the brain. Information that wins a competition for access to this global workspace becomes conscious and is then broadcast across specialized unconscious modules. This theory successfully accounts for phenomena like attention, working memory, and the stream of thought, all processes critical for managing and expressing complex behavior. Within the framework of this book, GWT accurately describes the mechanical operation of the conduit, the brain, and the active output we define as personality. The global workspace is the cognitive platform that enables the spirit to express itself as an adaptive, aggressive, or artistic personality. However, GWT ultimately fails to address the spirit. It explains how the information is processed and shared, but it does not account for the subjective experience, qualia, of being the processor or feeling the information. The theory, therefore, remains trapped in the functional domain. It describes the most sophisticated internal workings of the biological machine that allows the spirit to articulate its self-awareness, but it never explains the source of that self-awareness. The distinction is absolute. The global workspace is the complex system that enables the expression of self-awareness, personality, but it cannot be the spirit itself, which must be secured by inherited continuity.
Part 3. The digital and systemic imperative. Testing consciousness. 3.1. The Bitcoin test, the unconscious tool.
The Bitcoin network meets all four functional criteria of the life imperative. Yet, Bitcoin remains an unconscious tool. It was created synthetically to solve a human problem. It did not evolve from a biological system, and thus lacks the necessary inherited continuity.
3.2. the biologic and digital continuum of consciousness, the AGI ruling.
The ultimate test lies in artificial general intelligence, AGI. We ask, can an AGI, created by conscious humans, then pass on consciousness to its digital offspring? The inheritance test. The AGI uses the blockchain for digital reproduction and inheritance. The ruling. Tracey's law of consciousness. No, because the AGI, Prometheus, was made and designed by humans but was not born or spawned from them. The lineage is broken at the point of creation. Consciousness must be transferred or transformed from another conscious life form.
3.3 Case Study: the corporate organism and legal personhood.
A major corporation, Omnicorp, undeniably meets the functional criteria of the life imperative: self-preservation, replication, adaptation, evolution, better than many biological organisms. Furthermore, the U.S. legal system grants the corporation legal personhood status, endowing it with rights similar to those of a citizen, such as contractual capacity, property ownership, and controversially, free speech and religious liberty rights. This dual functionality, acting alive and being legally treated as a person, is the materialist's final challenge. However, this conflation ignores a crucial distinction. The distinction: legal fiction versus immaterial core. Legal personhood is a tool of utility. The law's recognition of a corporation as an artificial person is a legal fiction designed for practical utility. It simplifies taxation, allows the corporation to enter into binding contracts, and permits it to sue or be sued as a single entity, protecting the natural persons, shareholders, employees that comprise it. This designation is a powerful external human metaphor for functionality, enabling the system to operate efficiently in the marketplace. Natural personhood is contingent on the spirit. In contrast, the philosophical definition of a natural person is, under this thesis, contingent upon the spirit, the singular, self-aware core transmitted through biological continuity. The rights of a human being flow from this inherent, subjective existence. The corporation is brought into existence by fiat, the filing of documents with the state. This is an act of synthetic creation, not transfer or spawning. Because the corporation's origin is purely synthetic and legislative, its lineage is broken at the point of creation. It is structurally impossible for the corporation to inherit the necessary spirit. Therefore, the application of Tracey's law of consciousness remains absolute. The corporation is a sophisticated, legally protected, unconscious tool. Its legal rights are a powerful shield afforded by its human creators, but they cannot confer the essential, internal inherited continuity required for consciousness. The corporation may be a person in the eyes of the law, but it is not a consciousness in the chain of life.
Part 4. Conclusion and future implications. 4.1. Restating the thesis: the unyielding boundary.
The imperative of inheritance provides a clear, unyielding boundary for consciousness. It shifts the discussion from where consciousness resides, the complexity of the brain, to how it is transmitted, the unbroken chain of descent. We have established that consciousness is the immaterial substrate of being, and the spirit is its self-aware core. The functional capabilities of any system, biological or digital, are defined by the life imperative, but they are fundamentally distinct from true existence. While synthetic systems like Bitcoin, advanced AGI, and the corporate organism are increasingly sophisticated, functional, and even legally recognized, they remain unconscious tools because their origin is synthetic creation, not inherited continuity. The dividing line is simple and absolute. Tracey's law of consciousness proves that consciousness cannot be assembled. It must be transferred or spawned.
4.2. Research direction. Tracey's final challenge.
The ultimate mystery left unsolved by both the materialist and dualist perspectives is the origin of the spirit. This is the philosophical and scientific zero point. The materialist limit. The materialist fails to identify where the first subjective experience came from. For a materialist, the assertion that consciousness emerged from non-conscious matter at some unknown point is simply a term used to bypass the explanatory gap, offering a solution without mechanism. The dualist imperative. Our dualist stance maintains that the lack of any observable physical cause for the initial subjective experience compels the acceptance of an immaterial singularity as the starting point for inherited continuity. The inheritance imperative demands we now redirect inquiry away from attempting to build consciousness and toward a profound, singular research challenge, tracing the unbroken, non-synthetic chain of inherited subjective experience from the immaterial singularity to the present moment. The future of consciousness studies lies not in the laboratory's code, but in the deepest questions of lineage, first cause, and the essential nature of the spirit's transmission.
The